I got to tell you, it's really weird being here talking about infectious ideas. I'm the CEO of a company that is a life sciences company. It's dedicated the last 10 years to really not being infectious, reducing infection rates in hospitals and long-term care. So you guys are kind of freaking me out about all these infectious ideas. But for one day, I actually want to be infectious. And what I want to share with you is it's going to tie in a lot of what we've shared today, other than the aloe. I don't know if I can figure that, how to get that in the story. But I want to talk about the infectious side of leadership. We always talk about leadership from the side of effectiveness, but I want to talk to you about leadership from the side of how we touch people's lives. Are we just leading people, or are we empowering them? And I think what I want to do is I really want to challenge you guys on how we think about leadership in some pretty dramatic ways, I think. So, first of all, we're all leaders. You may not believe that. You may not be a CEO. You may not be a manager. But you're leading somewhere. You're either the coach of your daughter's soccer team. You're leading somewhere. You could be the homemaker with 6 kids. I know once, my wife back here, she's homeschooled 6 kids. 5 of them have gotten out of college. Mostly we just kicked them out. 1 more to go. She is one of the most amazing leaders I've ever seen. So leadership is not just CEO managers. We're all leading. Do y'all agree with that? Yes. Yeah. So the other thing is, you're not a born leader. You ever hear that? He's a born leader. Not true. None of us are born leaders. It's a skill. So we're all leading. It's a skill that you have to learn. You can't put your head in the sand and say, that's not something I do. And the last part is that your leadership is infectious. And this is what we're missing. And it's all tied into everything we shared today. Our leadership is infectious. You're either tearing people down in your leadership or you're lifting them up. And all of us have been in organizations, and most of us have been in organizations that what? They tore you down. I've heard a couple stories here today. So I want to look at this from a completely different perspective. So we have to be honest with ourselves. We have all these resources. We've talked a lot about resources today. Think about all the books, the conferences we go to. Oh my goodness, we should be the most amazing leaders on planet Earth. But are we? Think about this, 70% of us are not engaged at work. Do you know that's 100 million of us? 100 million of us go to work and we're not engaged. Here's the most amazing stat, 60% of us trust a stranger more than we trust our boss. Think about that number. 50% of us aren't happy at work. Only 35% of us are inspired. We're awesome. We've got this leadership thing down, don't we? Man, this is a tragic problem. So let's think about what is leadership. Let's kind of go all the way back to the bottom. Where do we start? And John Maxwell said this. He said leadership, and I thought this is a real simple definition. Leadership is just influence. And I don't mean like manipulating people. It's about influence. And he talked about 5 layers of influence. The first influence you'll see there is, hey, you just do it, kids, because I told you to do it. We've all done that as parents, right? We said we wouldn't do it, but we did. That's influence. And as you move up, you talk about they like you, what you've done for me. But look at the top. If you're at the highest level of influence you can be as a leader, you're somebody that they know what you stand for and who you are. Think about that. So I'm going to challenge you today, if you're going to be this leader, which you can't get being, who are you? The question is, how are you going to influence others? And this is a picture of influence. It's just a picture of 2 pictures of sheep. It looks like pretty similar, doesn't it? But I'm telling you, these 2 pictures are dramatically different. On the left, you see the sheepdog. Why are the sheep so organized? What's motivating them? They think that the sheepdog is what? It's a wolf. Yeah, so they're sitting there scared to death. He's going to eat me. On the other side, sheep are all organized. Everything looks good. But what's going on? It's the shepherd. The sheep trust the shepherd, right? So the motivation is completely different. So what I want to share with you is what we've grown up in is that left side, what I call top-down management or top-down leadership, and then the other side is what I'm going to share with you today, which is bottom-up. Bottom-up leadership, shepherd leadership, is way harder to do, and you're going to find out why it's so much harder. So this is the era I grew up in, top-down leadership. Jack Welch, GE in the day of in the 90s. And I knew when I came out of school, I could never be Jack Welch. I was not going to be CEO. I assured you I was never going to be a CEO because I was not an autocratic person. I was not a top-down. It's all about the CEO. It's about his ideas, and I need you to execute them and just do them. Or I'll find somebody else just look like right like you, and we'll get rid of you. What he did is he fired the lower 10% performing people every year in GE. I don't know if you noticed GE stock lately. It doesn't work too well. So, but that was what we all grew up in. That's all what most of us probably in this room know is it's all about the CEO or the leader, and y'all just do what I tell you to do, and everything's going to be fine. It's what we call command and control. It's simple. It's just what we've done. Is it effective? Well, yeah, in the military it's really effective. My wife, she had to be command and control. If you got a 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old, and you're not command and control, they are going to run you over. So sometimes you have to have command and control. It makes sense. Look at Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was a visionary who saw something that nobody else could see, and he had to be relentless. And it probably wasn't the best place to work, but he was relentless to bring some of the things that we've seen, some of the huge transformational products that we've seen. So there are times to be top down, but there's also times to be bottom up. And that's what I really want to share with you. So in this situation, the leader serves the team. It's not about the leader at all. In fact, I always tell people in our organization, nobody works for me. I work for them. I work for them. And in this type of environment, what I'm really trying to do is empower. We've got 200 employees in our company. I'm not trying to empower a few. I'm trying to empower 200. It doesn't matter what my idea is. It matters what their idea is, what their concepts are. How can I support them? In this type of environment, we never ask the question, why? Why'd that happen? Whose fault is that? We're always putting blame on somebody. That's what in a top-down type of management or leadership is like, is we want to blame somebody. Forget blame. Why are we so hung up on what happened? It's what do we do next? We can only ask the question, what now? What now? What now? So is it effective? Well, first of all, there's not that many companies that are what I would say bottom up. It's a difficult thing to do. It takes a leader that's willing to serve. It takes a leader who's willing to give up control. There's a lot of things that you're going to find in this, why this is a little bit more difficult to do. But if you look, this is a little bit dated, but look at the data. This is the top 100 companies to work for in 2017. 5 out of the top 10 companies were upside-down managed companies. There was only 17 in the whole list, and 5 out of the top 10. And look at the companies. SAS, Zappos, Wegmans, REI. These are exceptional companies demonstrating that it's absolutely an amazing thing. But here's the problem. If you're going to be in this type of leader, and I hope when you leave here today, you're going to be a shepherd leader, upside-down leader, servant leader, however you want to frame it. But you're going to have to know your why. Remember the level 5 of influence? They know who you are and what you stand for. You can't fake that. So hopefully y'all have read this book, Simon Sinek, Start With Why. It had a dramatic effect on me as a leader. And we were working on our why for our company. And we have a very purpose-driven company. And it still took us 2 days to figure out what our why was. And our why is only about 5 words. And so what he was challenging us with is, don't just tell me what you do and how you do it, which is what we'd always do at parties. But why? Why do you get up in the morning to do what you do as an organization? Is it to make money? That's just how we keep score. That's not your why. So the question isn't what is servant leadership. The question here is really the key. And so for you to be the servant leader that you want to be, you have to know your why. And I'm going to challenge you. You may be sitting here today and you think you know your why. I bet you don't. Why do you get up in the morning? What really drives you? And you really take some introspection to do that. And you think that's real simple. And if I started asking every one of you to tell me your why, I'll almost assure you, because it's difficult to know. Can't be selfish. It's got to be others-oriented. If you're getting up and it's all about you, you've probably already missed the boat. One of the best examples that I can think of of somebody who knows their why is Dabo Swinney. And you may not know who Dabo Swinney is. He's the head football coach at Clemson University. And I'm not a big Clemson fan. I'm actually a Carolina fan, North Carolina. And but I love this man because he knows his why. He's won 2 out of the last 3 national championships for football. If you ask anybody from Alabama, they know who Dabo Swinney is. But his one thing is he knows his why. He has dramatic influence. He's a level 5 influencer with his team. And if you notice that kid that he's putting his hand out to, that's a freshman quarterback who he won the national championship last year. Why was he such an effective leader? He knew his why. He was willing to trust folks, trust this young freshman kid, and he was willing to give up control. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today. We've talked about a little bit about the issues with control. And I want to tell you, control is a cancer in our life. And listen, I'm a recovering control addict. I come out of the quality control, quality assurance, regulatory affairs. I spent the first 20 years of my career doing nothing but writing procedures, validating systems, proving things that could never go wrong. I want to make sure I get 4 signatures and everything. Control freak. But you can't control what you even think you can control. It's just creating anxiety, fear, and worry. And those things are driving in your organizations, in your life. So I want to really encourage you. You are lying to yourself if you think you're controlling things. This is me sailing. Actually, I do like to sail. I'm not a good sailor. My wife would tell you absolutely. She doesn't even like to get on a boat with me. A lot of reasons why is because sailors love trying to control the uncontrollable. You think that we're in control of stuff. We know what sails we can put up. We can pull in lines. We can do all those things. But we're dealing with the tide changes, the current coming against me, the wind's always changing, storms are coming up. I forgot to put the plug in the bottom of the boat. That happened once. So there's the controllable and uncontrollable things, and I need you to accept you are not in control of these things. Even the things that you thought were controllable, you're not in control of. If you'll just set those things down, it is going to be the beginning of really changing how you look at things. So we have to accept this idea. So here's the real simple model for this. If we'll give up control with the people that we're working with, and this is why it's so difficult to be upside down, give up control, and I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you in your failures, and I'm going to trust you in your successes. And what's going to happen? People are going to start taking risks, and risks are going to bring about failure. And by the way, failure, can I talk about failure for a moment? We're talking about being in architecture. One of the things I learned the most in my second year was I was thinking about the painting you were talking about, and my eye started twitching when you talked about the white canvas. And I had a project that I couldn't get anything on the canvas to start this project. I didn't have any concepts. And my professor came by and he said, Steve, remember, the first thing that you put down on paper is always wrong. He said, so go ahead and put down anything. Just like he talked about layers. Whatever you're going to. Failures are not failures. Failures are iterations. You've got to be able to fail to go to the next thing, to go to the next thing, to go. Do you understand? We've been looking at failure totally wrong. And through that failure is how we get to innovation. So this is why we have companies that nobody wants to work in, nobody wants to innovate in. They're scared to make mistakes. You're going to get what? Fired. So this is a completely different way we want to think about it. And I want to take you through a story that I think just is one of the most amazing stories of somebody who gave up control, and it's in a place you wouldn't expect. George Washington. I don't know if you know this story too well. December of 1776, right after they'd signed the Declaration, right? And George Washington had lost every battle. He started out with 20,000 militia. He'd lost every battle up until this point. He was down to just a few thousand men. And he had to get across the Delaware before it was going to freeze up. His generals said, General Washington, there's no way we can get across. The river's freezing up. If he didn't get across, the British were going to come across with 20,000. The idea of America was gone. He knew he had to get across. If you were one of those few thousand men and you just lost 15, 18,000 men, why would you follow George Washington? He was 0 for 5. But they followed him because he was a level 5 leader. They knew what he stood for, and his cause was just. and they would follow him to hell and back. And that's what George Washington said. He extended trust to his generals. The general said, we can't get all the boats across. There's no way we can do that. And he said, I trust you to do it. And here's the most important thing that George Washington said. The general said, well, what if we get there and we lose the moment of surprise and it's daylight? And you know what George Washington said? Then we'll fight in the daylight. He told them it was okay. I trust you to do it, but even if you fail, then that's fine. What an amazing thing. Isn't that what America is? Even if we don't get it and you fail, we'll fight in the daylight. And they did. Do you know that we didn't lose anybody in that battle? It was the first battle we won. We would not be sitting here today in America if George Washington wasn't the amazing leader he was. Do you realize how close it came? That all of this you see is not here? But for one man and 2,000 people who believed in that man. So he did extraordinary. He empowered these people to do something that was unachievable. So I'm going to leave it with you. You now know you're a leader. You can't get away from it. You know this is something that you have to work on. It just comes down to, what are you going to do? You're leading today. You're either going to leave here continuing to be a sheepdog, putting fear in people, tearing people's lives down, even though you may not know you're doing that, or are you willing to turn this around and be a shepherd leader, give up control, accept that failure is okay? Imagine the impact we would have if all of us started to lead in a completely different way. Not only would we accomplish amazing things like the idea of America, which is just crazy if you think about what was accomplished, but what about the lives that you're touching? Think about that. Think about the infectious portion of that. How many lives could we touch if we were actually, when we were leading them, we were serving them and lifting them up? Thank you.